Hi, Klaus. Jeff Allen here. I just saw your post on fair versus unfair terminology. And I thought that was, I actually saw it yesterday. While I was at the music store, I saw this thing, and I think I just made a little comment in the by text, but I thought I'd make a little video about it because do it, and it's easier for me to make the video because at my hand. I got a tendonitis in my left hand, so I'm trying to restrain from writing too much and playing drums. But fair terminology, and so you mentioned the kind of the different topics under what fair means. The main categories are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. If I remember the four, that's what I got out of it when I read through it. And then there are kind of subparts of that, and how can terminology be along those lines. And you made a difference between glossaries and terminology, and I totally agree that, you know, a lot of people think that making glossaries is terminology, and there's different types of glossaries, right? There's a glossary with just the terms, a list of terms, right? Multilingual glossary. Then there's the ones that have definitions, right? That's another step. But some people just use the terms. I've sold stuff like that, you know, where all you do is just do the simple glossary, just have the terms, because all you're going to do is do a translation, and you want to make sure that you got an equivalent of the term in another language. Bam, you do the translation. That's how you do quick translations and sell the product, sell those translations, okay? You don't need anything more. Don't need to have a definition in that kind of context. I just have to make sure that, well, it kind of helps, but I'm not saying you have to have it, but it does help. But if your project can't warrant doing it, that extra work, you know, it doesn't get paid for. So, but I think that this is interesting, what you're mentioning here about, when I think about, I mentioned that in every project I've ever worked on, probably 30 years, I'd say that they have the FAR part of it, the fear part of it, FIR part of it, okay? So the findable part, definitely, for everything I've worked on at least 30 years, or I've tried to make sure it happens, right? The interoperable part, I've been talking about interoperability since at least 2000, when I was working at ELDA, because I was working a lot about interoperability with databases, right? So language databases. So you're interoperable, doing lots of publications talking about that. And I remember even doing a support letter for, was it the whole TMX stuff. Well, not the TMX, but the TBX stuff. I remember writing a letter of support for that early on, talking about interoperability in the support letter. So, and that was in the year 2000, 1999, 2000-ish. Then reusable. Everything I talk about is about reusability. Authoring memory. I'm one of the inventors of the term. I do a lot of talking about that, content reuse, right? So, and whatever it be, content means terms, right? Definition, and metadata, data metadata, whatever. And then the whole thing of accessibility, I started getting involved in the accessibility part in about 14 years ago, because I've been at the company for 14 years, right? So, and one of my first jobs here was actually doing validation of products, and we did, and so I was a lead for the 8 different types of validation with the first customers. It was before beta. I mean, this is a different thing. This is the first level of validation, and so at least what we call it in our company, validation for that. And so one of them was accessibility. We had one for documentation and one for accessibility. And we had to do VPATs. We had to do VPAT tests. So there was a testing for that, and we still continue to have VPAT testing, right? So for all our products. So a lot of this is, and here I'm talking about products here. You're focusing here on specifically about terminology. You know, very, very limited, the focus thing. And I think that you're right in pointing to all these things, because can the terms be found? Can be, located, found, discovered, That's the hard part, right? And identified, right? Identified, whatever you want to call those words. You know, now accessibility. There are two different types of accessibility. Now, you know, there are two different levels of accessibility, right? So I want to be careful of that too, because they could be interpreted two different ways. It needs to be accessible in the sense you can access it, or it can be accessible in the sense that you can, for, you know, the hard of hearing, the hard of the vision impaired folks. I mean, so both of these acts are applicable. If you think about accessibility, both are applicable in a sense, right? I think findability and accessible in the sense that you can find things or you can access them. That's kind of thing, but accessibility, you got both terms on it. So you got an interesting ambiguity here that it applies to both. So that's good. I hadn't thought about that when I was talking about, mentioned that yesterday in my little comment, my written comment. And then the interoperability, yeah, we already mentioned that, and reuse. So there are, if you think about it, this is these are things that a lot of people don't really think about. They're beginning to. People are beginning to think about these because of having systems that allow this to happen, right? Having term databases, or, you know, going beyond just an Excel sheet. Or an Excel sheet can sometimes be an advanced level for people that they're trying to do terminology. They're trying to actually just, you know, say we got it in our content, which can be in Microsoft Word, right? And we got all these words, and then making a list of them, and what you do with that, and how do you do, can be a little, like, kind of a notepad or whatever, some kind of a list. Sometimes up on the wall, I mean, whatever. And then, you know, could turn it to an Excel sheet. Then you start having more columns, and then you say, oh, we need a definition. We need the context. We need an example sentence of the term in context so that we know what it is, how it's used. Sometimes that helps define things too. It kind of depends. So there's a lot of interesting things about this. And great to see that you're focused on it. You know, there are a few of you that are focusing on these type of things. I've had the opportunity to work on a bunch of terminology related projects for the past 14 years. And I did it before too when I was at other companies. Well, actually going back as far as Caterpillar, I mean 30 years ago. So a lot of it was terminology related. We had to strip down the 1 million terms down to 50,000, and then increase that, make it, you know, more multilingual and all that, and make it all working with machine translation. So this has been fun watching it for 30-ish years and doing it and being involved. And now I'm doing a bunch of other things, so not so much in that field, but you know, really willing to discuss, debate, dialogue, you know, to see that this continues on, because terminology is kind of I don't talk about terminology. I just talk about, you know, vocabulary, because that's what corporate people like to talk about, is, you know, corporate vocabulary, institutional vocabulary. Terminology is kind of a term I try to avoid it, just because it kind of turns people away. Now, maybe in Germany it does. It's okay, cool, but in the English-speaking community, just the word terminology sounds so geeky, like you're a library rat somewhere, right? So I want to be business folk, you know, I want to be relatable to people. So I call it a corporate vocabulary. That's, people totally understand what that means. But yeah, anything we can do to support this, push it on, make it move, and get it to be, so it's kind of like just a daily thing. You don't have to think about it and talk about it as some theoretical thing. It's just something you do, and, you know, just business as usual. So thanks, Klaus. Have a good day.